Some empires don't fall because of bullets. Some fall because of a photo. And this is exactly that kind of story. In the world of UK organised crime, the name Jonathan Cassidy carried real weight. He wasn't some small-time street dealer standing on a corner. He was a man who had transformed himself from a builder into the mastermind behind one of the biggest cocaine import operations the northwest of England had ever seen. Dubai villas, luxury supercars, and a lifestyle that looked like success from the outside. But underneath it all, it was one of the darkest criminal networks the region had ever produced. Inside his circle, people had a different name for him. They called him the Scouse El Chapo. And Jonathan didn't mind that nickname one bit. If anything, he wore it a little too comfortably. By early 2020, Cassidy and his tight crew had become serious players in the UK drug trade. This wasn't small scale. We're talking multi-million-pound shipments, secret compartments hidden inside vehicles, cash moved through coded couriers, and an international network that stretched all the way from Amsterdam to South America. The whole thing ran like a machine that nobody could see, and that's exactly why it kept running. Encrypted phones gave them a confidence that was hard to shake. Messages, jokes, business talk, family photos, everything bounced around inside a digital world they were completely sure no one could ever break into. This was their safest space, or at least, that's what they believed. And then came the moment. A moment so ordinary that most people wouldn't even think twice about it. Jonathan took a simple photo of a Panadol packet and sent it through his encrypted phone. No guns, no drugs, no cash. Just a regular box of painkillers sitting in someone's hand. But hiding inside that photo was the clue that would change everything. The route was simple in theory. Carrying it out was a completely different story. Cocaine was sourced in South America, shipped into Europe, and then moved through Amsterdam inside specially modified vehicles into the UK. These weren't amateur hiding spots. These were carefully engineered compartments, built specifically so they wouldn't be spotted during roadside checks, invisible under torchlight. Each run carried anywhere between 120 and 150 kilos of product. Once the cocaine reached UK soil, the network spread out across the country. Manchester, Leeds, Birmingham, Glasgow, and further when the money was right. Jonathan handled the importation side of things, the international calls, the big agreements, the major decisions. His business partner, Nasser Ahmed, took care of the money. Collections reached up to £250,000 per run, moved through Bitcoin, unregistered banking channels, or trusted couriers who carried sports bags instead of briefcases. Every pound earned got cycled back into legitimate businesses, land, properties, even a former cinema. From the outside, it looked like success. From the inside, it was a laundering machine keeping the whole empire fueled and running. What made this crew different from other criminal groups wasn't violence or intimidation. It was volume, regular shipments, regular payments, steady growth. No noise, no chaos, no drama. The people involved didn't think of themselves as a gang. They thought of themselves as a business, professional, structured, and completely untouchable. That last part was exactly their biggest problem. There is a very thin line between confidence and carelessness, and when you start believing the world can't touch you, that line has already been crossed long ago. On their encrypted phones, this group operated under completely different identities. Jonathan Cassidy was known as Whiskey Wasp. His brother Jamie, who had once shown real promise as a young footballer before all of this, went by Nuclear Dog. The financial brain of the operation, Nasser Ahmed, used the handle Dotted Jaw, and Joshua Arvis, a younger member of the chain, operated as Optol. On those encrypted phones, they lived two completely separate lives at the same time. One was business kilos, cash, logistics, routes. The other was totally normal. Home photos, family moments, everyday conversations. They trusted these devices so completely that they never stopped to think that all of this could one day end up as evidence in a courtroom. Jonathan especially had started living inside the Scouse El Chapo image. One evening, while watching Narcos, he noticed that his birthday matched El Chapo's, He took a screenshot and sent it to the crew. A friend instantly fired back, "Coincidence? I think effing not." To them, it was banter. It was swagger. To investigators later on, it was a breadcrumb leading straight to their door. Ahmed and Jonathan even shared photos from football trips, images from Anfield, snapshots of normal life. It was a reminder that despite the enormous scale of what they were doing, these were still local lads who had simply stumbled into a much bigger game. But underneath all the nicknames and the jokes, that confidence was slowly turning into something else: comfort. And comfort is the one thing an organized crime network simply cannot afford. For investigators, the timeline of April 2020 read like a pressure gauge that was filling up fast. 6 weeks. Just 6 weeks where Jonathan Cassidy's operation became faster, louder, and far riskier than it had ever been before. Deals weren't just being arranged anymore. They were being stacked on top of each other. Multi-million-pound loads moving one after another across motorways and borders like a non-stop conveyor belt. Messages from that period showed a man who genuinely believed nothing in the world could touch him. The more money came in, the bolder he got. And then came one particular message that defined everything: scruffy mugs with rucksacks. It looked like a throwaway joke, a casual dig at plainclothes police officers. But the timestamp attached to that message changed everything, because at that exact same moment in the real world, one of his associates was being grabbed by plainclothes officers who were carrying rucksacks. Text and reality, perfectly lined up. For investigators, this wasn't just a clue, it was a confirmation. A direct bridge between the hidden world of encrypted messages and the physical events happening out on the streets. Over those 3 months, close to £10 million was moved. Orders were placed, routes were adjusted, and Jonathan's confidence hit its absolute peak. And running right through the middle of all of it was one tiny detail, so small that nobody paid any attention to it at the time. A Panadol packet. For months, detectives had been putting the pieces together. Shipment routes, burner phones, cash drops, coded handles. Everything pointed toward Jonathan Cassidy, but nothing was strong enough to pin him to the wall. The full picture was there, just one piece was missing. Then came the moment nobody in his organization ever saw coming. A photo dropped into the encrypted chat. Completely casual, sent without a second thought. No gun, no route map, no cash. Just a packet. Panadol. Clear photo, good lighting, held in someone's hand. Exactly the kind of picture people send without thinking during a normal conversation. For investigators watching the data, it looked like background noise at first. Then one analyst zoomed in, on the glossy plastic wrapper, right where the light was reflecting off the surface. Something was there. A ridge. A whirl. A perfect fingerprint pressed into the packaging. Clear enough to lift, clear enough to run through the system. And it matched. Jonathan Cassidy. Whiskey Wasp. The man steering shipments worth more than most people will ever see in their entire lives. One single careless photo had just confirmed 3 things at once: his identity, his device ownership, and his physical presence. All from one click. And it didn't stop there. As investigators kept working through the images, a bigger picture started forming. Interior photos of his house sent to associates. Glimpses of family gatherings. Images of Nasser Ahmed's home. None of these photos were ever meant to be evidence. But together, they built a detailed map, connecting people, linking locations, confirming timelines with a level of precision investigators hadn't even dared to hope for. The first domino had fallen. Not because of a raid, not because of an informant, not because of a surveillance ban parked in the dark somewhere. Because of a Panadol packet. One throwaway moment had cracked open one of the biggest drug conspiracies the Northwest had ever produced. And for Jonathan Cassidy, there was no coming back from it. When word spread that investigators were making arrests linked to intercepted encrypted devices, Jonathan Cassidy's world changed overnight. The confidence he had built over years of high-level dealing suddenly had a crack running straight through it, and he wasn't going to stick around to find out how wide that crack would get. On the 8th of July 2020, he made his move. One flight, one bag, one destination: Dubai. For years, this group had operated behind layers of secrecy, code names, tight circles, trusted couriers. But now, with associates being stopped by plainclothes officers and messages lining up a little too neatly with police timings, Jonathan decided that distance was the safest option available to him. Dubai offered exactly what he was looking for: space, sunshine, and a place where money speaks louder than suspicion. Footage recovered later showed him fully leaning into that lifestyle: designer watches, high-end clothing, the kind of spending that turns heads wherever you go. He drove a Lamborghini through Dubai's streets as casually as someone popping out to buy groceries, and while he was thousands of miles away from home, his browsing history told the rest of the story. Scrolling through luxury interiors, looking at villas worth £2.5 million, trying to lock in the life he imagined he would be living permanently. And then there was the bed. A £22,000 showpiece he had been in the process of buying. The kind of item that represented everything he believed he had built. One officer later joked, "He'll never sleep in it." They were absolutely right, because while Jonathan was enjoying the Dubai heat, the temperature back home was rising just as fast. Detectives weren't panicking. They weren't chasing shadows. They were watching. And they were waiting for the moment he stepped back onto UK soil. By autumn 2020, the shine had worn off the empire. Money was still moving. Contacts were still picking up. But behind the scenes, investigators were lining everything up carefully. Phone data, routes, couriers, cash drops, all of it pointing in one direction. And then Jonathan Cassidy did the one thing nobody expected. He came home. 17th of October 2020. After months in Dubai, he stepped off a flight at Manchester Airport. No disguise, no last-minute change of plans, just a quiet walk through arrivals, straight into the arms of officers who had been waiting for him. The man who'd once run a multi-million-pound import operation was arrested in seconds, not through some dramatic takedown, because of a return ticket. A month later, his brother Jamie was arrested at home. Police found a machete, an encrypted phone, and paperwork connected to the same investigation that was now going to shape the rest of his life. A career that had once shown genuine promise on the football pitch ended with evidence boxes on a kitchen table across Greater Manchester and Merseyside. The net pulled tighter. Couriers were intercepted. 2 separate car stops during a single surveillance day brought in £250,000 each, stacked in bags, hidden under seats. Another £500,000 followed shortly after, all tied back to the same network, the same hierarchy, the same decisions made at the top. Ahmed's financial web came apart next. Bank transfers, Bitcoin movements, unregistered banking connections. Every pattern investigators had been tracking for months suddenly clicked perfectly into place. And with phones attributed, movements mapped, and cash recovered, the structure that had once moved tons of cocaine across Britain was finished. What had taken years to build collapsed in a matter of weeks. And for the first time, the Scouse El Chapo story didn't look like a legend anymore. It looked like exactly what it was. By the time the case reached Manchester Crown Court, the swagger was completely gone. The empire that had once moved tons of cocaine across the country was now reduced to screenshots, cell site maps, and a forensic team holding up a blown-up photograph of a Panadol packet in front of a courtroom full of people. For years, this group had worked entirely in the shadows. Now everything was on full display. The legal battle didn't begin with the charges themselves. It began with the data. Defense teams pushed hard, challenging how the material had been collected, whether it could actually be used, whether it counted as transmission or storage. This stopped being just a drugs case. It became a national test of what encrypted evidence really meant in a court of law. High Court, Court of Appeal, months of back and forth. But piece by piece, the prosecution held its ground. Jonathan Cassidy, Nazar Ahmed, and Jamie Cassidy. Their roles were laid out like a clear blueprint. Importation at the top, finances running underneath, distribution spreading out at the edges. Surveillance footage, banking records, seized cash. The timeline built itself. The evidence was too detailed, too consistent. The fingerprints, the timestamps, the messages that had lined up perfectly with real-world arrests. The pressure built until the only move left was to accept it. A trial had been scheduled for February, but all three defendants entered guilty pleas before it ever began. Each was sentenced according to their role in the operation. Jonathan Cassidy, 21 years and 9 months. Conspiracy to import cocaine, conspiracy to supply cocaine, conspiracy to conceal, transfer and disguise criminal proceeds. Nasser Ahmed, 21 years and 9 months. The same offences. Jamie Cassidy, without the importation charge, 13 years and 3 months. Conspiracy to supply cocaine, conspiracy to conceal, transfer and disguise criminal proceeds. Joshua Avis had been on bail and vanished. The rest were taken down to the cells as the courtroom settled back into silence. And just like that, a multi-million-pound enterprise ended the way most of them do. Not with gunfire, not with car chases. With paperwork, procedures, and a judge reading out the years. For years, the operation ran completely in the shadows. Cash counted inside sports bags, cocaine measured out in blocks, and a confidence built on the belief that nothing and nobody could ever reach them. But in the end, none of the scale mattered. Not the modified vehicles, not the international contacts, not the millions quietly moved through back channels. What brought the whole thing crashing down wasn't a dramatic police raid. It wasn't a rival crew. It wasn't an informant. It was a moment so small that nobody even noticed it at the time. A photo of a Panadol packet. A fingerprint caught in the reflection of the wrapper. A piece of evidence hiding in plain sight the whole time. From that single moment, the myth started unraveling. Identities were confirmed. Timelines were built. An entire empire was mapped out through messages the crew genuinely believed would disappear forever. And that is the real irony of all of this. You can move tons of product. You can run a network that stretches across continents. You can convince yourself completely that you are untouchable. But this game never ends with the big moments. It ends with the small ones, the slips, the arrogance, the things you don't think twice about. Criminal empires rarely fall with a bang. Most of them fall with a whisper and a photograph that should never have been sent in the first place.